Ladies and gentlemen, we are live on channel 1349 for another episode. As you know, on channel 1349, we discuss the hottest sports topics and a splash of current events. I'm your host, Will Judson, and I'm joined by former Miami Dolphin and South Carolina State University Hall of Famer and newly minted Circa Millions participant, my father, William Judson. How's it going, Dad?
Oh, it's going great here in the Atlanta area. I'm actually in Douglasville, Georgia, but what's going on with this weather, man? It's 23 degrees here, man. So it's a little chilly, but I'm warmed up and ready to go though.
Yeah, my kids yesterday or this past week, they had a chance to play in the snow, and my daughter was actually eating the snow, which is crazy. But
Oh
what
man.
what what would you expect from a 1 year old? So it was
Yeah.
good for them to get to play in the snow. We worked from home all week, and it got up to about 60 degrees yesterday. So all the snow was melted, and now we're ready for the conference championship game weekend. So.
Yep, ready for it. Also, we had a little snow a couple of times, one 2 weeks ago and one last week. The one last week was just a little bit of dusting. Most of the schools did close because of the temperature and the icy roads, but that black ice here in Georgia is crazy. But we're ready to go. It's championship weekend.
There we go. So as you know, I just mentioned when introducing you, newly minted Circa Millions contest participant. And so, as we know, you finished out for the year 65th overall, and that kind of brings us. Before we start to talk about that, the last couple weeks, you know, you had to go out there to Vegas and collect the money, and beginning of the new year, we've had some things going on, but we're back just in time for conference championships. So, tell us a little bit overall about how that experience was when you went out there to Vegas to collect the money, and then your overall view or what you learned and just your overall view of how you finished in the contest and how everything went for you this football season.
Well, it was exciting. I first started off when I flew out there to enter the contest, and that Circa Millions contest. You have to fly out to Vegas. Can't do it online. Can't ask a friend. You have to go out there and do it yourself. So I flew out to Vegas, went to the Circa resort, and put in the bet, and found out that man, there were a lot of people. There were close to 6,000 people that participated, and each person paid $1,000 each to get into the contest. And man, they gave away millions. I think the top prize getter gets $1 million. They pay probably close to $250,000 for each quarter. So they break it down into quarters, so you can win lots of ways. It's tough, kind of betting against the spread, but I figured, hey, you know what? No, I can do it just as well as anybody else. So my mind and my knack for games, basically, my knack for broadcasting games is just as good as everybody else. So, I gave it a try. And in
So
doing that,
handicapping these games.
handicapping the games, I gave it a try and started off kind of slow because, it's tough. It's tough in the beginning because you don't really know how these teams are gonna shape out. You don't know the new stars, the teams that were not that good last year. Now they're better this year. The new stars coming in, quarterbacks, coaching changes, different things. So, it's tough in the beginning. So it's a filling out process. But guess what? Everybody has that filling out process. So it was kind of tough. So, but I ended up winning 62.1% of the games going against the spread. And I think the winner was somewhere around 68%. So I was pretty proud of the way it turned out. My record ended up being something like 53-23, and I had two ties. And coming down to the last weekend, it was really, really tough. And that's one thing that kind of knocked me down a little bit because going into that last weekend, I think I was in like 50 something place. But as you know, that last week, you don't know who's going to play, there were certain games that you knew they had to win. And, but there were other games when You didn't know if the team was going to rest players, if they're going to play them for one half. Then there was that situation with Saquon Barkley. Are they going to let him play and break the record? And that could have, made, that could have made a difference. But so all in all, I came in 65th place. I learned a lot, and I'm excited about getting into the contest next year. Now, flying out there, I went to collect the money. And the guy told me that, man, I rarely get a chance to see a winner. And they treated me like royalty. I went there last week and they were playing these these divisional matchups. And I could not believe it. In that big arena with all those televisions, they had people paying $500 a pop to just watch the game, just a regular game on television. And there had to be at least 1,000, I would say 500 to 750, maybe 1,000 seats. So they made their money. But me being one of the Circa winners, they put me on the second row, dead center, and just, treated me with royalty. So I got my money, flew on back, and I look forward to doing it next year.
Good, good. Yeah, and I was, this is a contest I've been following for a while, but I kind of really brought the idea up to you this past summer, like, hey, why don't we try to do this contest? So I'm glad you enjoyed it. For me, overall, there are a lot of lessons learned. I feel like I handicapped the games right this past season, but I wasn't as fortunate as you were. I finished 43 and 47 for the year, 90 total bets when you go 5 bets a pop, or each week from week 1 until the end of the season. So finished 43 and 47 overall. That's a 48% winning percentage. And so as we've talked about in the past, you just need to be around, I think it's 56% to make good money. Now to be profitable, just overall profitable in betting, if you're about at 52%, you're going to be profitable. But to really make a substantial amount of money, 56%. So I finished at 48%, like I said. So if that was, and I did the math. I've been tracking everything. If I did $100 a bet every single week, I was down about $875 for the year. And that goes off of the odds being a little bit higher, sometimes minus 110, minus 120, depending on what the number was at. So it was a learning experience for me, but I feel the only thing where I could make an adjustment going into next year is block out all the noise. I don't care what the media is saying, anybody. I got to use a little bit more of my gut when it comes to these games. I feel like the analytical standpoint, I was fine looking at the averages, what teams were giving up at home versus away, etc. All of that is fine. But I also have to take into account that I've been around football for a long time. I've got good experience. And just to trust my gut and don't study too long. We've heard the saying before, study long, you study wrong. So when you've got a gut feeling and you draw off your experiences from football over the years, take that to the bank and let the chips fall where they may. So overall, I think I did a good job, but there is room for improvement. And this year you went out there and signed up for both of us. But this year we're looking at, once they release the schedule, planning a trip out there, go out there for the weekend, get signed up, and just be dialed in and locked in, ready for the season coming up. So overall, I had a good time.
Yeah, and I agree. And I'll just end by saying, there is benefits of looking at the analytics, how a team has done the past 10 games, how they've done at home, how they do in cold weather, this, that, and the other. But you also have to take in consideration, just your gut feeling. And I use that most of the time. I go on a hunch. So I nickname myself Mr. Hunch. And so Mr. Hunch will be back at it again next year. And this time it's going to be bigger and better.
Couldn't agree more, man. So looking forward to it. And now let's kind of move in to the next part of the show and talk about the conference championship games coming up this week. Now we know who the teams are. The Chiefs are going to take on the Bills, and then the Eagles are going to be taking on the Washington Commanders in Philadelphia. So first of all, let's talk a little bit. We're going to start off with we'll start off with the NFC Championship game, and let's talk a little bit about how these teams got here. Starting with the Washington Commanders. That was a game when they played last week against the Detroit Lions where I picked the Lions to go to the Super Bowl. So I was thoroughly not impressed with how the Lions came out there and played. They turned the ball over, I think, 5 times. And when you turn the ball over 5 times against a dynamic rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels, it can come back to hurt you. And so that's what they did. They went into Detroit, the loudest atmosphere in the playoffs right now in that dome up there. The fans were wild, and Washington took control of that game and ended up winning I think they ended up winning 45-31. What were your overall thoughts on how that game went?
I was thoroughly surprised. I just did not think that that Washington could go in there and do it with a rookie quarterback, and he's just on that roller coaster ride this year, and he's going up. So I just couldn't believe how the Lions played. They came into the game and they were somewhat, just kind of complacent a little bit. Then they tried to turn it on, but it was just too late. Too many turnovers, and they couldn't stop Jaden Daniels in key situations. So, now everyone is going to kind of make excuses for the Lions and start talking about their injuries. But prior to that, they had all of those injuries. And during those injuries, people thought that they had overcome them because they have a next man up mentality. But they just could not get it done, particularly on defense. I was really, really disappointed in how the defense the defense played. And Aaron Glenn, who was the defensive coordinator, I really thought that might have some type of effect on him becoming a head coach. But obviously it did not. But the Detroit defense really, really disappointed me because, Washington doesn't really have a great running game. Now, the quarterback really contributes to that. He contributes to them having a better running game. But I thought that the Lions could shut their running game down and just make Jaden Daniels beat him with his arm. And basically he did. They couldn't stop Terry McLaurin. They couldn't stop Jaden Daniels. And Zach Ertz hurt him. So Detroit, deserved what they got. I kind of felt sorry for them a little bit because they hadn't been there so long. It would have been good for the Motor City for them to win. But Washington well deserved that victory, and congratulations to them.
Yeah, and this kind of speaks to the greatness or how good he's been this year. I'm not going to say he's an all-time great. He's only been doing it for less than a full season. But when you think about the weapons that Washington has, how he's doing this, it's a makeshift offensive line that they put together in the offseason. And then you've got Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is older than me. I'm 39, man. He might be older than me. And then when you look at Terry McLaurin, over the course of his career, he's always been looked at as a good, solid player, but a number 2 or a low tier first receiver. But if you're looking at somebody like him as a first receiver, you would never think that it would be on a team that's gone as far as they've gone. And so Jaden Daniels coming in here has made him a borderline superstar. Terry McLaurin has looked great. Nobody can stop him. And we're talking about a guy that's 5'11", maybe 6 feet. Not the fastest guy, but just a competitor. He's a dog out there. And so I like what Jaden Daniels has done for them on offense. Again, on defense, Dan Quinn has just brought in that enthusiasm for the team, and they're playing well on defense with a bunch of guys that you really don't know much about. We know they have a solid defensive line, but as far as just overall, they don't have a bunch of big names on defense. And so
right.
For me, I liked what I saw from Washington. And then when you look at the Eagles, now kind of switching over to the Eagle side of things, they got things done against the Rams this past week. I thought the Rams were going to pull that game out, and the Rams had a couple of turnovers that hurt them, but the Eagles overall were able to get that win. And now as we move forward into this game, this is going to be a great game from a number of standpoints. These teams have played this will be their third time playing this year coming up. And for me, I'll go ahead and make my pick and kind of talk about what I like about this game. I think the Eagles are they're going to win this game. The number right now is sitting at +6.5. Washington. I feel like the Eagles are the better team. Now, moving over to talking about this NFC Championship game and who we like in this game. For me, I think it's the Eagles' game to lose. I think that the Washington Commanders can keep this game within that 6.5 point spread, that plus 6.5 or minus 6.5 point spread. But I think this is the Eagles' game to lose. When you look at how they played the first two times this year, they're divisional rivals. The Eagles lost the game in Washington. Jalen Hurts did get hurt in that game. Kenny Pickett came in there and played, and they still found a way to lose. The Commanders turned the ball over 5 times, and at the end of the game, the Eagles couldn't quite pull it out. This was a game that they should have won still. Ball hit Devontae Smith right in the chest down by the goal line, and they weren't able to make that catch to try to win this game. So I think that Washington is very familiar with what Philly does, but Philly is familiar with what Washington does too. And I think this will be where that Cinderella carriage turns to a pumpkin this week for the Commanders. I think that Washington is, for them to have a chance, they're going to have to stop the run, and they haven't done that the first 2 times that Saquon Barkley has faced this defense. I think that Vic Fangio will find a way to kind of bottle up Jaden Daniels in this game and contain him enough to the point where Philly can eke out a win. Maybe they win by 3 or 4 points. It's going to be, weather should be a factor. It's an outdoor game. I hadn't checked the official weather for the Sunday matchup, but I think that overall the Eagles will probably win this game, but not cover the 6.5.
Well, I have to agree with you on that, and primarily because Jalen Hurts is not really playing 100%. I think he is slightly injured or something. He's not 100%. You looked at the injury report during the week. He wasn't a full-time participant every day. So something is wrong with him. He doesn't look just right. But it's a blessing that they've got Saquon Barkley, because that is going to be the key. The first game, they ended up winning the game at home, the Eagles did, and Barkley rushed for 146 yards. Jaden Daniels passed for 191 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And in that same game, Hurts was passed for 221 yards, no touchdowns, no reception. But Barkley ran for 146 yards. And the second game, he ran for 150 yards. And that game was 36-33. So won by Washington. But so I just think that, both teams are very familiar with one another in the same division. They split this year. The game is in Philly. If Hurts plays 75%, 80%, they should win this game. As far as the line is concerned, I agree. I think that it's going to be a closer game than 6 points. I do think that the Commanders will cover that +6, +6.5, but they would not win the game. And it's been a great game, a great season for Jaden Daniels, and I wouldn't be surprised if they won the game. Let me just first off say that they could actually win this game, because the Eagles just are not clicking on all cylinders. I do think the Eagles have the better defense, and I do think that defensive line is going to overcome the Washington's offensive line. I don't think they're going to get much in the running game, and Jaden Daniels is going to be out there just throwing. Now, with Terry McLaurin there, I think that there will be a reason for it. Eagles has the number 1 rated defense. So they're going to cook something up to kind of make sure that they contain Daniels. I'm sure they have a spy on him. If Nakobe Dean was playing, which he is not, he would definitely be spying on Daniels. But I think it'll be a good game. It's going to be cold. Good season for the Commanders. But I think the Eagles will win this game.
I agree. And what I've been hearing all this week is how the Eagles last week in their game against the Rams, they basically got lucky. The Rams should have won that game. Stafford took the sack at the end of the game, and they were getting ready to win the game, and Philly barely threw for any yards. But the way I'm looking at that is they didn't throw for that many yards because they didn't really have to. Yes, the weather had something to do with that, But why would you do that when you can just run it down their throat? Saquon Barkley ran it down the Rams' throat last week, and they did whatever they wanted to do. And so I got a little nervous for the Eagles at the end, but the better team won, is what I'm trying to say. And so when that does concern me against Washington, just like you said. Wouldn't be surprised if the Commanders were somehow, some way able to eke this game out. But to me, the better team is the Eagles. Washington had a significant injury up front and on the offensive line. I can't remember his name right now, but he tore his ACL. So we'll see how they adjust up front as far as that's concerned. But I think overall, just top to bottom, the Eagles have the better team. So we'll see what happens again. Yeah. I like the Commanders to cover, but I like the Eagles to win the game.
Same thing, and Fangio, he will conjure up some kind of defense, even though he has the number one defense. He'll put something together for Jaden Daniels.
Vic Fangio, that's another point. When you bring up the coaching, okay. I think Washington has. I think they have the advantage with the coaching and the quarterback at this point, because when you look at it, you say, okay, who would you rather have? Nick Sirianni and an injury-riddled Jalen Hurts, or would you rather have Jaden Daniels and Dan Quinn? I think the coaching and quarterback matchup goes to the Washington Commanders. But then after that, when you look at every single position, the top to bottom on both sides of the ball, I like the Eagles. So any last thoughts before we move on to the next game?
It'll be a good game. I'm looking forward to it, but I do expect the Eagles to come out on top. Fly, Eagles, fly.
All right, and so now let's move over to the better game, in my opinion, of the two. You got a clash of the Titans. You've got the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about. Well, first of all, let's talk about. Give us your view on how the game went last week between the Chiefs and the Bills and the Ravens. How did that? What did you see in that game? And then we'll kind of go over to the conference championship game.
Well, I saw two quarterbacks who basically were unstoppable. One, Lamar Jackson made critical errors in the first half, and it kind of put his team behind the eight ball a little bit. But you know, Josh Allen, he did a great job in keeping his team in the game. He was unstoppable. Both teams came out in the very beginning by scoring on their first drive. So I said, oh man, it's going to be one of those games that's going to go over the total. It ended up going slightly under, but that's okay. But I think that Buffalo, Josh Allen is almost a one-man wrecking crew. He's just something else. His receivers aren't great, but they're adequate. I don't think Amari Cooper, he didn't play that much, or he may not have played at all because he was basically a non-factor. But this Shakur, I mean, he is something that needs to be stopped. And I think that he will be probably stopped this game. But getting back to what you said about last week. Buffalo had the lead, but in the second half, the Ravens were coming on. They were coming on strong, and they were away, and I thought they were going to win that game. Now, unfortunately, Mark Andrews made 3 critical errors, but we can't just put it on Mark Andrews. I mean, he dropped that 2-point conversion, and who knows? After that, who knows what would have happened had they gone to overtime. So we can't just say that was the reason, but he did make some crucial errors by the fumble. He had another drop pass. It wasn't his best game. And then on top of it, he ended up still hadn't spoken to the media. And I think that's sad that you'll do something like that, because had he caught those balls, you can't stop Mark Andrews from talking. He'd have been talking yakety yak the whole week. But overall, I mean, there was some missed field goals. The weather conditions were kind of tough, but the weather, it was what it was for both teams, and both of them are teams that should be able to play. Although Buffalo weather's a little bit colder than the Ravens, but the Ravens overall played well. I didn't think that they used Derrick Henry enough against Buffalo. So had they done that and controlled the game more, then they could have been in that game. But It was just one of those games where I felt like the winner of that game is going to the Super Bowl. However, my pick for the Super Bowl may surprise you.
Well, I'll say this. Just my overall opinion on the game. I disagree a little bit with you on them not using Derrick Henry enough in that game. I think they were trying to get him involved and run him in the first half, and that was when Buffalo was just a little bit. They were fired up, had a lot of energy, and they were bottling him up in the first half. And I think that kind of flustered the Ravens a little bit, and that's why they got behind early in that game. I think there's a little bit of blame to go around for everyone. Starting in the first half, Lamar Jackson, he looked very shaky. He looked like the old Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. That was a horrible throw where he threw that interception early in the first half. Taylor Rapp picked it off, I think it was, in the deep corner. I don't know what he was looking at when he threw that. That was a bad play. And then when you've got second and long or whatever it is, second down, and you're under pressure. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson. And you're trying to avoid the sack and you're switching the ball to the other hand. This is not little league football, son. Get rid of the football. The name of the game in the playoffs is turnovers. And when he did all that and fumbled that ball and Buffalo got it in their territory, that led to more points, and it was a momentum swing. So there was blame to go around for everyone in that first half. The defense, too. Buffalo went right down the field on Baltimore, and we know what Buffalo is. They're a one-man offense. Yes, you got James Cook, and they're physical up front running the football, but we're talking about James Cook. We're talking about a guy that's maybe 5'10", 185, 190 pounds. You got to stuff the run. You cannot let James Cook and that offensive line for Buffalo out physical you, if that's a word. So I think there was blame to go around for everybody in the first half. And then when you get around to the second half, Mark Andrews makes that critical drop, or he caught the ball. They were dry. Buffalo was shook in the second half. Baltimore came in, took control of that game. They went right down the field. They were getting 8-9 yards a pop running the football. And then the play action was there. Mark Andrews makes the 15, 20-yard catch down the field, and then he gets the ball stripped out of him. That took away some of the wind out of the sails for the Ravens. And then you're right there in the game at the end of the game. The Ravens go right down the field, and you talked about it already. Mark Andrews drops that ball to tie the game up to get it to overtime. Again, like you said, who knows what would have happened once we got to overtime, but the first thing, I can critique that play. Yes, Mark Andrews dropped that ball. But here's the other thing. Lamar Jackson, and I went back and looked at the play a few times, and we talked a little bit about this off air. I think because Likely caught the touchdown the play before.
Yeah, he did.
He did. Mm-hmm. Likely was making some key catches, and Likely he's a great player. He's got huge hands. He catches the ball, and I was telling you, his hands look like baseball mitts, the way he catches and the way that ball disappears in his hands when he catches. I think coming out on that 2-point conversion, Lamar Jackson had already decided he was going to Isaiah Likely first, no matter what. That's who he wanted to throw that ball to. And so what happened when they ran the sprint right, when they sprinted out to the right to throw that ball, first of all, I think that's a bad play call. The reason why I say that's a bad play call by Todd Monken is you're cutting the play down to only half of the field. The defense only has to worry about half the field. You're not getting Derrick Henry involved at all. You have been running it 8-9 yards a carry every single time. What's wrong with going with Derrick Henry on that, or at least a zone read option to where they have to defend Andrews and Lamar? But for me, you split the field in half when you roll out to the right. The second part is, getting back to my original point, Lamar Jackson deciding he was going to throw to Isaiah Likely. Likely wasn't open. And so he panicked for a second and kept rolling out when all he had to do is look at what the defense was giving him. As soon as he sprinted out to the right, it was a pick play by Baltimore, so that could have been called. That's the first thing. But second of all, Mark Andrews is open right away. If he gives him a nice, soft, easy throw for him to catch, he walks right into the end zone. But what does he do? He keeps rolling, and then at the last second, he throws a bullet like Nolan Ryan at him. Yes, he's got to catch the ball. I understand what you're going to say. He's got to catch the ball. He's a tight end. Yes, it hit him in the chest. I understand that. You got to make that catch. But if I'm the quarterback, you want to make plays like this as easy as possible for your guy to catch. So that's the only part where I blame Lamar. Again, Mark Andrews has to catch that ball. He's got to be a professional at the end of the game and talk to the media because, number one, the media and the fans are what get you these big TV deals. And you've got, it's not about the beat reporters at the end of the day, but you got beat reporters that have to have quotes from you for their stories by a deadline after the game. So, like you said, any other time, if he catches that ball, he's gonna talk to the media. And so I think he's got to be a professional in that situation and speak to the media after the game. He decided to come out on social media 3 days later and talk. We don't care about the game at that point. We moved on to the Chiefs and the Bills. We don't care about what you have to say. So I think that's where Mark Andrews was wrong.
Well, let me just say this. In no way, 0% is that play on Lamar Jackson. It's just no way. We could talk about, hey, he was looking and that speculation, whether likely was number one, maybe it was, maybe they've come out and said it. But if in years past, Lamar Jackson probably would have forced that ball in there if likely was number one. This year, he decided to go to his second read. Okay, now, you're saying he should have thrown the ball sooner. Well,
I
maybe
think Andrews was the first read, but he just didn't want to throw it to him.
Okay, well, the thing about it is this. I don't think he should have thrown it earlier. Maybe he should have. And who knows, he wouldn't have dropped that. He threw a pass that any high schooler should have been able to catch. Now, I know the conditions were tough. It's cold, and you're running to your right, and you're looking back for the ball, and the ball may have been slightly behind, but the ball hit him in his gut, and the ball was not a bullet. It wasn't, it was an easy pass to catch. And I know you said, being a receiver, former receiver, you're saying that's a very, very difficult pass to catch, but not for a skilled all-pro, borderline, maybe Hall of Famer to drop that ball. You've got to catch that ball.
Stop right there. Mark Andrews is not a borderline Hall of Famer. He's been hurt 60% of the time he's been in.
Yeah, but
he's not a borderline. You took it too far.
Okay, well maybe
he's not a borderline Hall of Famer.
Okay, maybe that's a bit much, but I tell you what, he's still considered one of the top tight ends in the game. As a matter of fact, he's one of the highest paid tight ends. So he's got to make that catch. He's got to make that catch, no ifs and buts about it. Sure, Lamar Jackson made plenty of mistakes in the first half, but the second half he played like he wanted it. He came down he was a little bit more than fine. And you mentioned something about likely as a great player. I think he's a pretty doggone good player. I would not consider him as a top 5 tight end in the league.
He's a great player in that offense.
Well, okay, and Mark Andrews is also. Mark Andrews should have caught that ball. We're making it too much, putting it too much on Mark Andrews like he blew the game. He made some critical errors, but that 100% is on him. And nothing should be, because Lamar Jackson could have just used all his speed and tried to dive for the pylon. Maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't. But he said, hey, this guy's open. Nobody deflected the ball. The ball was in his guts. He had 2 hands on it, and he knew that was his fault. So it's not on Lamar Jackson at all. It's 100%.
I didn't say it was on Lamar Jackson.
Well, you're criticizing. You're criticizing him, saying he should have thrown it there sooner.
No, all I'm saying is Mark Andrews has to catch that ball. He makes too much money to not catch that ball. But as you said, a former receiver, I know a nice, easy, catchable ball when I see it. If I'm a coach, you're always looking for ways to get your players better. That's a point that I can hammer home with the quarterback in this situation. You got to make the ball friendly to catch. I remember, and I'm not going to speak on any names from back when I played, but we'd be standing on the side as receivers looking at certain throws in certain situations and saying, come on, man, you got to give us an easier catch to make. Yes, he has to make that. And it's not a difficult catch, but when you're running full speed and you know that you're coming up out of bounds soon and the quarterback is looking and taking too long to throw, and then he throws it harder than it should have been, and it's not even out in front of you, you're having to wait back for it, that's a tougher catch than it should be. 100% on Mark Andrews, but if I'm critiquing the play as a whole, it could have been a lot easier play than what it was. That's all I'm saying.
I think we're nitpicking, and we can move on from that. But anyway, they lost the game, and they're out, so they're watching the game like you and I. And let's move on to Buffalo versus Kansas City. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so for me, I'll go ahead and say this. As far as Buffalo and Kansas City is concerned, yes, Buffalo did beat Kansas City earlier in the year. And when you look at things, Buffalo is undefeated since, in the last couple of years. I believe Buffalo is 4-0 against Kansas City in the regular season.
Yeah, we go with the analytics. Go ahead.
This is not analytics. If you let me get to my point, this is not analytics. Okay. Buffalo is undefeated against Kansas City in the regular season. 4-0 since 2021. And in the playoffs, they're 0-3 since 2021. That's not analytics. That is a simple gut feeling for me saying that
that's not a gut feeling. Those are facts.
Let me finish getting to my point. My gut feeling is that that'll be the same thing that happens this weekend if you let me finish. I think when it's nut cutting time, when it's gut check time, the better player wins and the better team. I think Kansas City overall has the better players. I think they have the better coach. I don't trust Sean McDermott, and a perfect example is getting back to last week. They dominated that game in the first half. Well, not dominated, but they played better in the first half. And then what happened in the second half? Buffalo seemed to go ultra conservative, and they were playing against the clock instead of the Ravens, and that almost got them beat. We saw what happened in that 13-second miracle in the playoffs with Sean McDermott. I don't trust Sean McDermott in big spots, and I just trust Patrick Mahomes a little bit more, or a lot more than Josh Allen. And also, I trust Andy Reid a lot more than Sean McDermott. This is a simple thing. When it comes down to be the man, you got to beat the man. And Buffalo hadn't done that yet. And so I'm going to take the Chiefs at home to defeat the Buffalo Bills. It's such a short line. I'll just take the money line on that. But I think the Chiefs are going to beat the Buffalo Bills in Kansas City.
Well, you can't say you take the money line. It's -2, so it could be a 1. I would tell you this. Okay.
That's why I said the money line. I wouldn't do the 2. I just take the money line. That's what I'm saying. The Chiefs.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. Buffalo, 13-4. It's at Kansas City, 15-2. KC is favored by 2 points. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna take Kansas City. The Bills won the first game 30-21, and they were at home. But kind of similar to what you said, I'll take Andy Reid, Spagnuolo, and Mahomes over McDermott, Bobby Badich, and Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, they're very similar in that they can take over a game, and when it comes down to the last drive, they both are very, very dangerous. I think Andy Reid is a little bit more of a skilled coach. He's been in this situation many more times.
I'd say a lot more
than McDermott. And I've got to go with Spagnuolo as a defensive coordinator. He's probably one of the top, him and Vic Fangio, in the game. The last game, Mahomes was like 23 for 33, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And their leading rusher was Kareem Hunt. He had 60 yards. Now, Josh Allen in that game put the ball up 40 times, 27 completions, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 262 yards. The leading rusher, you know who was in that game? Josh Allen. Okay, so you look at Kansas City and you look at Chris Jones on that leading that defense, they're going to be going all out. That game's in Kansas City, and the weather shouldn't be a factor as far as one team favoring the other, because they both are can kind of play in the cold weather. Kelsey is at his best in these. He's starting to really turn it on. So look for Kelsey to have a big game. He always manages to find a way. And Mahomes, he's doing Mahomes is being Mahomes. So I expect Kansas City to win this game. Shouldn't be. I think they're gonna beat them by at least 10 points. I don't think it's gonna be as close as the NFC game. I just think that Buffalo Bill. It's just something about Buffalo that they get into these big games like they've never won a Super Bowl. They lose all these Super Bowl games. Now they're trying to beat Mahomes. Not this year. Not this year. So I'll take Kansas City in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I just, Buffalo's had a great season, and I told you this at the beginning of the year. I told you Buffalo was going to win their division because we know the rest of the teams in that division. But also, I thought Buffalo would make a nice run, and I think it ends in Kansas City. I just think Kansas City is the better team. They got the better quarterback, better coach. They're playing at home, and again, when it's prime time in the playoffs, Kansas City has the guy, the Michael Jordan of football, Patrick Mahomes. So I like the Chiefs to win that game. And being that the number is so short, I think it's at like 2 right now. That's why I was saying I would just take the money line because the money line's at like minus 130 or something. That would be probably the smartest bet. But yeah, I like the Chiefs to win this game. And again, I'm not going to go against what I've seen. So until it can actually happen and the Bills knock off the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl, maybe next year I take the Bills. But until that happens, I'm going to take the Chiefs.
Okay.
All right, so moving on. So we both have the Eagles and the Chiefs winning their games and getting to the Super Bowl. So that'll be a rematch of a couple years ago, and I'm sure that will be plenty of stories and headlines. Andy Reid going against his former team again. So that'll be an exciting matchup. But to be honest, I'm good with any team that gets there.
Yeah, I am too, and I'll just tell you if our predictions come true, then Kansas City Chiefs will three-peat. They just will. And down in New Orleans, and Andy Reid's not gonna lose to the Eagles. He's not gonna do that. But anyway,
I don't think they'll lose to the
be seen.
Commanders either. I think if they can taste it and get to that Super Bowl and have a chance at history to win 3 Super Bowls in a row, they're not going to be stopped. So they
Okay.
just got to get through this one first.
Yep.
All right, so moving on, as we know, as soon as Week 18 was over, it's what they call Black Monday in the NFL. We had a lot of coach firings, and so the vacancies have been lasting up to this week. I think we're down to only one coaching vacancy now, and so let's go ahead and jump into some of these. Let's talk about some of these coaching hires, and we'll start from the most recent hire, the Dallas Cowboys hiring Brian Schottenheimer. What are your first thoughts on that hire?
Well, I think that they ended up getting who they could get. Um, he fit Jerry Jones. I think I'm not gonna say he's his own worst enemy, but he has a right to do whatever he wants to do. He owns the team, and he wants to continue to be the general manager and continue to have a say so. Brian Schottenheimer was already in the house. He was already associated with Dallas, and now all of a sudden he's going to become the head coach. Now they're trying to say, oh, it keeps continuity and this, that, and the other, but I don't think that's an exciting hire for the players and really for the fans. But some of the players, like maybe Dak Prescott, who has a good relationship, I understand, with Schottenheimer, they want to keep that going. But I just think that they really wanted someone else, but the coaches that they wanted probably did not want Dallas. They did not want him to be their head coach. So but anyway, it is what it is. Schottenheimer is the man, and he'll do a good job.
I agree. When I saw this hire this morning, Dallas Cowboys hire Brian Schottenheimer. I was laying down in the bed. I rolled over and yawned again and asked my wife, "Hey, what we eating for breakfast?" I mean, it's like, okay, whatever. They're hiring Brian Schottenheimer. You said it. He was already in house. As an offensive coordinator, he's always been just okay, nothing special. But he has had a chance, like you said. There is some continuity there. The players know him. Cooper Rush, the backup quarterback of all people, spoke very highly of him and spoke on his intellect, and they think it's a good hire. But to me, it's just another figurehead or coach that Jerry Jones and company can control. because that's a tough job in Dallas. Mike McCarthy did a good job. It's hard to win there. It's like a zoo there. And what I mean by that is people are constantly in and out of the building. You can pay to go in their facility and watch them practice and all kind of stuff. It's a big time business there. So Jerry runs the show, and that'll be more of what happens in Dallas. And the one thing I will say is at least it wasn't Deion Sanders, because I don't think Deion Sanders should be coaching in the NFL at this point. So
Oh, wait a minute, wait. Okay, let me just say something about that. We are constantly doubting Dion and his abilities, and maybe he may not be ready to coach in the NFL, but you make it seem like that's the worst coaching choice possible. And
it's
I
the
don't
worst of
know
the
if
two. I think Brian Schottenheimer
I
is a better coach than he
I
is.
well
Head
we
coach
don't
candidate.
know that. We don't know that. I mean, what do you know about Brian Schottenheimer?
I know that he's called offensive plays in the NFL, and he's been around for a bit. He's had some mentorship, tutelage under Pete Carroll. He's been in the building with Mike McCarthy to see how they run things, and so at least I can say that he can call plays. And they've got their offensive stars. Who knows? Maybe they'll draft Ashton Genty in the draft. I think they're trying to keep the continuity there because they gave Dak Prescott all this money, and so I think Dion is perfect where he's at now. In college, he can recruit. He's got some credibility from that standpoint. But when we're talking about NFL, where you don't get to control your roster and bring in as many stars as you want, I think between the two, I'm not saying that Brian Schottenheimer is a home run hire, but I think between those two, if I'm comparing those two, I'll go ahead and just take Brian Schottenheimer.
I mean, you may be right, but you're just so definitive about it. I don't know, because something about that zoo in Dallas, as you called it, the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, he thrives on all of this exposure and excitement and that sort of thing. And Dion will probably bring that to him. And I guarantee you, if Dion comes to the Cowboys, there are some players that want to play and be involved with the Dallas Cowboys. That he will bring. Actually, you're talking about recruiting. He will actually get some of his players based on who he is. And he may not have all of the X's and O's, but I guarantee you, he knows who to hire, who does have the X's and O's. Similar to what he done in Colorado. He's brought in an excellent coaching staff to help the Colorado Buffaloes become the team that they are, based on what they did this year versus what it was when he got there. So it'll be something very similar. You have to remember, you don't have to really be the one that actually does all of the coaching. There are very few head coaches that'll just coach everything. Dion, if he makes the right hires, right defensive and right offensive coordinators, he can make that thing go. So I don't know. I don't know about this
Again,
Schottenheimer thing,
again, you're
because
comparing.
I think that Schottenheimer, he comes from good lineage. His dad was a great coach,
Great coach.
but that's his dad. Okay, that's his dad. He may not be. So we can't be so quick to discount Deion. At least it wasn't Deion Sanders. Well, you know what? The Dallas Cowboys will get what they get.
Okay, let me ask you this. You compared it a little bit too much like Colorado. It is not like Colorado. He can bring coaches in and they can coach until they're blue in the face. Again, there is a salary cap. They haven't paid Micah Parsons yet. And let me ask you this. You said guys would come just because it's Dion. Let me ask you this. If you were in the NFL today and you had a team that was offering you $10 million dollars a year, the Cowboys offer you $2 million a year because they're strapped by the
Come
salary
on
cap
now.
with all
Come
the
on
players.
now. Come
Are
on
you going to
now.
go just because it's Dion?
No.
Okay, so that's my point. Players are going to go after the money.
But I tell you this: if one team offered me 10 million and the Cowboys offered me 10 million, I may pick the Cowboys.
Of
All things
course,
being equal, all things. Why? Why? What do you mean? Of course,
of
10
course,
million is
because
10
then
million.
that's a fair thing. You're making this what you were making it seem like
No,
earlier is that people are just going to flock there just because it's Deion Sanders. At
no,
the
no,
end of
no.
the day, it's about money.
No. When you say I'm making it seem like, let's not go by that. Let's go by what I actually said. Okay, in a situation where it is, neck and neck, they could pick the Cowboys because of Dion. They could. But whereas before with Schottenheimer, they said, Jerry Jones, Schottenheimer, I'm going to go play with the Cardinals. Maybe. I don't know. But I think Deion brings that look. Now, of course, $10 million to $2 million, nobody's, well, I'm not going to say it. Very few people will do that. Okay? But to be a part of that Dallas Cowboy aura, the America's team and all of that,
They haven't been in the NFC Championship game since
they hadn't been in the
1993.
NFC. They haven't been in there since 1993. Whatever you want to say, they could go for the excitement because
Well, they can do that
Deion.
now.
Well, I'm
It's
just telling
Dallas.
you.
They can do that now.
I disagree, and you're saying it's an automatic choice between Schottenheimer and Deion Sanders. I don't know.
I would
I
personally
don't
take,
know.
and they sell enough tickets as it is. If you're about trying to sell tickets and keep the media in the building and all that, okay, you go ahead and take Dion. But if I'm just looking at it from a technical standpoint, coaching,
Well,
I
see, you
probably
keep saying coaching because Dion's staff may end up being better than Schottenheimer's staff. You just never, and I'm telling you, you act like Dion is going to be calling the play. He's more of a motivational leader. And with today's NFL players, I'm telling you, with all of the, you know, things that they like to do, he's more like them than Schottenheimer is. Just saying.
okay. Moving on to the next hire, which I think is similar to a Deion Sanders hire, but he's already shown what he can do on a much higher level, on the college level and on the NFL level, and that's Pete Carroll. The Las Vegas Raiders are hiring Pete Carroll, 73 years old, to come in and kind of establish some, not some continuity, but some structure and get them rolling back in the right direction. He's 73 years old. I'm sure it won't be a long tenure when he's there, but he's going to help them get this thing back on the tracks in Las Vegas. And so I like the hire. Pete Carroll is a young 73 years old. He's got plenty of energy, and he's a disciplinarian. He likes to have fun, but he's going to definitely establish some structure there, and I think that's what they need. They just got to find a quarterback now. I don't know how they're going to do it, whether they do it in free agency with Sam Darnold or if they try to trade up and get one of the quarterbacks in this year's draft, but I like the hire. What about you?
Well, I think that's one of the best hires. I look at that and another hire that we're going to talk about later as being, maybe the best two hires in the offseason. Pete Carroll, and I don't really know what the situation was with him in Seattle now. I really don't know. But I didn't know. I thought he was just tired of coaching and just wanted to just retire and go out to pasture. But apparently, he still got that fire burning. Pete Carroll will stabilize that franchise. Got Tom Brady there. And Tom Brady, I think they wanted somebody else, but they'll settle for Pete Carroll. And they didn't let him out of the building, because they felt like if they didn't hire him, somebody else was. Pete Carroll is going to revitalize that franchise. And trust and believe. Now, they may not make the playoffs, but they're going to be very, very competitive. He has his teams competitively playing every year. Pete Carroll has it. So, basically, that's what we're looking at. I like the hire. I think it's going to do well. As far as the quarterback situation, hey, they might have Sam Darnold. Hey, what about Russell Wilson? Because I've heard that they kind of rekindled their relationship. Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson coming there. They could trade up. They could get somebody young. But even if they get one of these quarterbacks who are not, in my opinion, the greatest of great quarterbacks, they've got to get a veteran in there who can win. Because Pete Carroll is not trying to rebuild and, next 2 or 3 years. Like you say, he's 73, but he is a young 73. And I think he'll have a dynamite staff. They'll be very disciplined. Those players will have fun. Pete Carroll is nuts. That's a good hire.
I agree. And I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs or anything. So I think it is sort of a rebuild. He just wants to send them off the right way. Maybe that second year or so they threaten to make the playoffs, but how about the AFC West? Andy Reid in Kansas City, Jim Harbaugh in LA with the Chargers, Sean Payton in Denver, and now you've got Pete Carroll with the Las Vegas Raiders. That is a heck of a division.
It is, and I tell you, it is going to be a tough division to win in as far as X's and O's. So I look forward to that. All
Yeah,
right.
okay. All right. So we'll move on. And this is one I want to talk about real quick. Well, first of all, let's talk about the Chicago Bears. They signed Ben Johnson to an agreement where he'll come in. That's the offensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, and he's going to be their head coach. I like Ben Johnson from a coordinator standpoint, and you and I have talked about this before. I don't know what he's going to do from a leadership standpoint. I've listened to him kind of talk in interviews, and I get the feeling that he may not be able to do what you talked about that Dion can do, and that's command the locker room and relate to the players. That remains to be seen. I like what he did in Detroit, but now he's going into Chicago where this is a different situation for him. The offensive line is in shambles, so it's far from what they had in Detroit. They don't have a two-headed monster at running back like they had with Detroit. And then when you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, guys like that, that's not in Chicago. So I think they're going to have to, first of all, before anything, address the offensive line and go from there. So overall, I think that's probably the best move that the Bears could have made. You're weakening your divisional opponent in Detroit by bringing their top play caller in there. And so we'll see what happens. Maybe Caleb will. What I would expect Ben Johnson to do is not exactly run what Detroit ran. I think he needs to sit down and talk with Caleb Williams about what he's comfortable with and then go from there, because that's what Ben Johnson did with Jared Goff. They did a lot of that play action zone read stuff that he did out in LA, and he did what Goff was comfortable with. So I'm hoping that that's what he's going to do in Chicago, tailor the offense around Caleb Williams, and then see what happens.
Well, I don't know what Ben Johnson's going to do. He supposedly was the hottest candidate on the market, and he was the offensive coordinator. He may do well, he may not do well. It's going to depend on his staff. He's going to be one of those head coaches that I believe probably will call his own plays. I would think he may be like that, but so I don't really know. I think there's a lot of work to be done in Chicago, and to be honest with you, I think Pete Carroll would have been a better hire, for Chicago
I agree.
because he's a veteran coach. But you know what? That remains to be seen. Everybody thinks, since he was a great coordinator, maybe he'll turn out to be somebody like Sean McVay, or maybe he'll be someone like Minnesota's coach. I don't know what he could be. I just don't know about these coordinators coming in as first time head coaches,
Not in
because you
situations where they need to win right away.
yeah,
You know,
well, and then on top of that, look at the division he's in. He's got to go up against Detroit. He's got to go up against Minnesota, and he's got to go up against Green Bay. So you know what? They'll finish last again. But it could take a few years for them to get it back together. If they end up being something like 8-9 or something like that, they should jump over the moon and be happy, because Chicago, that's a mess up there, to me.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, you spoke on it. I think Pete Carroll would have been probably a better move for them, but the ownership out there is so volatile and up and down. They're letting the media and fans control who they hire. And so the media, that's what they talk about. They need to hire Ben Johnson. You talked a little bit about it earlier, how the Raiders were looking at someone else before Pete Carroll. I believe it was Ben Johnson. They tried to get Ben Johnson, but the Bears did that and said, hey, we're not going to let Ben Johnson get out of the building. And so they went ahead and hired him. And so we'll see what happens. Again, I'm not convinced just because he can call plays with a bunch of studs on offense that he'll be able to translate that over to Chicago, but we'll see. All right. Now, the one that I really want to talk about is what happened down there in the Sunshine State with the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I don't know. I know I'm younger than you, but I'm old school in a sense. And what I mean by that is Jacksonville interviewed Liam Cohen, who was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He went up there, interviewed with Trent Baalke, the GM for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they couldn't come to terms at that point. Maybe he went up there, Cohen did, and sounded great to Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, and he blew the interview out of the water. Whatever. So what does Cohen do? He goes back to Tampa Bay and uses that as leverage to get the Glazer family down in Tampa Bay to make him the highest paid coordinator in the NFL, regardless offense or defense. They raised his salary and he agreed to a new contract with them to pay him $11 million a year to call the plays. What does Shad Khan, the owner for the Jaguars, do? Is a mess. He went to University of Illinois, but I still can't hold back on him on this. What does he do? He decides to fire Trent Baalke a couple days later. And then Liam Cohen goes back and interviews with them again, the Jaguars, after he agreed with the Buccaneers that he would stay with them for another year at $11 million a year. And now all of a sudden he decided he wanted to take the job. I understand this is a business. Everybody's in it for themselves. But just me, how I was raised, if I give somebody my word and I go back to the Buccaneers and they make me the highest paid coordinator at $11 million, I'm going to go ahead and stay there for a year and come back in the next year, because who wants to coach in Jacksonville anyway? It is a dumpster fire down there. So I think, just as a man and giving somebody your word and agreeing to a new contract and getting and negotiating with them and getting them to give you new money, and then you turn around and take the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think that's a little foul.
Well, I have to agree with you. To be honest with you, I don't know that much about Liam Cohen. I can look at Tampa Bay's offense and say that Baker Mayfield, which is one of my guys, as you always say, he's starting to play well and do a good job. But I don't necessarily know if that's because of him. Now he's going to go be a leader of men. He's going to go down to Jacksonville, and Jacksonville is not going to win very many games. They just aren't. So I'm kind of scratching my head about this. I don't know. Maybe it's the owner, but why not hire somebody like, maybe, I don't know, McCarthy might not have wanted that job. Or, maybe Pete Carroll didn't want it. I have no idea. But that is, to me, Ben Johnson and Lee, he's probably, more in demand. I probably would take him over Liam Cohen, but I shouldn't really say that because I don't know much about him. I didn't know Liam Cohen from Liam Neeson, the actor. I don't know. So we'll see what happens down there, and we'll go from there.
well, I'll say this, man. It 100%. These guys that are coming out of Tampa Bay getting these jobs after 1 year is incredible to me. The guy that's Dave Canales, who's the head coach for the Carolina Panthers, he was the coordinator last year for the Buccaneers. And to me, that's just they're very talented on offense. When you look at Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Mike Evans, the tight end, I can't think of his name right now. Cade Otton, that's his name. Chris Godwin. They drafted a young receiver this past year. They have a ton of weapons on offense, including Baker Mayfield. And so if I'm an offensive coordinator, that's where I want to go, because that weak division that they're playing in, they're putting up record numbers on offense, and that's what's getting these jobs. Liam Cohen, I know a little bit about him. He's 39 years old, just like me, came out the same year as me in high school, played quarterback at UMass, set all kind of records up there, was actually roommates with Victor Cruz. So he was the one throwing Victor Cruz all those balls. But if you look at his background, that's his MO. He moves around and will go wherever the money is going to pay him. And see, here's a good thing about it. We know he's probably not going to win in Jacksonville. I hate to say that. He's not going to win in Jacksonville, but guess what? Once he gets fired in 3 years from now, he's going to get his whole contract, and if he wants to, he can take his family and they can move to Maui and live happily ever after. He's going to achieve his dream as coaching in the NFL as a head coach. So I can't fault him for it, but just by how, like I said earlier, how I was raised, you don't do that. That's just bad business.
Yeah, and that's why I say Liam Cohen, Liam Neeson, Jacksonville was taken. And they were taken. So, we just have to go along with that. And I don't expect them to win no more than 2 or 3 games next year. But, hey, who knows? He may surprise us.
if they're healthy next year, I mean, they have some weapons on offense. They'll win more than 2 or 3 games just because they're in the AFC South, which is probably the worst division in football. And then you got the NFC
So
South after that. So
so who are they better than? They're not better than Houston.
they're better
They
than
they,
Tennessee.
they I don't know. I don't know.
They're about
I
like
don't
the
know.
Colts. They're like the Colts. They're
Yeah.
actually, I would take them over the Colts. If the
No,
Jaguars are fully healthy, I would take
no.
them over the Colts.
I would not. I think the Colts defense, and they got to do something about Anthony Richardson. But I just think Jacksonville is the bottom of that. And Liam Cohen coming in there, and he's gonna help Trevor Lawrence. Come on, man.
I
I
don't
mean,
think $55
Trevor
million
Lawrence
a
is
year, you
not going
can't
to.
be helped.
Trevor Lawrence is not even going to listen to him, man. They're going to be going straight to the owner and doing that thing. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's move on to the next one, which I
Okay.
think is a great hire.
And are we talking about New England?
We're talking about New England.
New England. I think that's a good hire. Mike Vrabel. He's established as a head coach in the NFL. He turned Ryan Tannehill's career around in Tennessee, and so I think he's going to bring discipline. He's an excellent decision maker. I don't know if you remember when they played the Patriots a couple years ago in the divisional round. When they beat the Patriots, he was able to take advantage of some kind of clock rule. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I
Where
remember that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, he's a forward thinker.
yeah.
He's
I
always
think it
been
has something to do with eligible. One of the eligible player bringing in a lineman and some about it
he
was
was doing
something
something,
quirky.
and he
Yeah,
was draining the clock when he had the
right,
maybe he was making them get penalties on purpose to keep draining the clock.
right,
But he's
right.
always looking for every kind of advantage. He's a student of the game, and he's shown that he can do it, at a big time level, getting the Titans to the AFC Championship game. So
And
I
and
like.
he and he brought Josh McDaniels back. So Josh McDaniels gonna be his OC, and I think that's gonna work well. Now, I don't know how that's gonna translate the first year because I still expect Buffalo to be up there, and we'll talk about the Jets in a minute. But I expect, hey, the Dolphins coach Mike McDaniels gonna be on the hot seat. They got to do something. So I don't expect them to finish over the Dolphins. I don't expect them to finish over the Bills. I do expect that maybe they can eke it out, but they're gonna be third place maybe, but I don't know. We'll see
I'll say
over the
this.
Jets.
I think it was a good move for him because he's going to have control. He's going to do what he wants to do up there. But not only that, he's got a young quarterback who he can kind of groom and tailor to play the game the way he wants him to play it. But also, he's on a rookie deal. And they've got over $100 million in cap space. So they're going to be able to bring in players if you want to go play in New England. They'll be able to sign some free agents and build this team around Drake May, and then we'll see what happens.
It ain't like going to play with Dion and the Dallas Cowboys. So
Maybe
we'll
not.
see.
Maybe not. So we overall we like that hire. Now moving over right on the East Coast, we're going to stay out on the East Coast. The New York Jets hiring Aaron Glenn. What do you think about that hire?
You know, I probably think a little bit more of that hire than I do of Ben Johnson in Chicago. Not saying that that's a bad one either, but Aaron Glenn, they're saying he's one of us. He played for the Jets and he knows the New York culture and things like that. And from what I'm hearing, he's a good leader of men in that situation. He had command of that defense. But you know what? It didn't show. It didn't show in that last game. But you know what? There were a lot of injuries, but people weren't talking about those injuries when they were winning, though. So I don't know. I mean, I believe he's probably gonna call I don't know. He may call the defenses like sort of like a lot of coaches do. Maybe Belichick called the defense, although he had a defensive coordinator. So I don't know. I just think that thing is a mess. They got to figure out the quarterback position. I don't think Aaron Rodgers should be their quarterback again. Aaron Rodgers may not respect Glenn. I don't know. He may or may not. He has been a person that they've spoiled him, given him everything he wanted, and he had more power than the coach. So, but if they don't use Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be their quarterback? It's just a mess. So I think this is going to be a tough situation for him. Best thing he can do is just get that defense with Sauce Gardner and the rest of those guys over there to play lights out, and just, you got a great running back. He's got, two excellent receivers. Just get somebody to be a game manager, and no one be better to do that than Aaron Rodgers if he and Glenn can get on the same page. But if I'm the new head coach coming in there, I sit down and have a talk with Rodgers, and how that first conversation goes will let me know. Either you're going to stay or you're out of here. Go on and retire. I don't care. You can go and meditate in the rocks, in the caves, or whatever you want to do. But Aaron Rodgers, man, I don't know. He's the key. The key is going to be their quarterback.
Well, for me, I'm just going to be honest. I love to see black coaches get hired, but this is a bad hire, man. Look, when you look at who they've hired, let me just say this. Let me say, when you look at who they've hired the last couple times, they just had Robert Saleh. The interim coach was Jeff Ulbrich, who's a defensive guy. Before that, they had Rex Ryan. They've had Todd Bowles. I've seen, and they did have Adam Gase. That was a horrible hire. I've seen.
They had Pete Carroll. They had Pete Carroll.
Yeah, back in the 90s, yeah. But I'm saying the last 10, 12 years, they got to get away from hiring these defensive coaches. They were fine on defense. They should have tried to go after Ben Johnson. I don't know if he wants to coach in New York, but the only defensive coach that I could have seen them wanting to hire if I was them would have been Mike Vrabel. When you look at Aaron Glenn, hey, I know they had a lot of injuries in Detroit, but even last year when they didn't have a lot of injuries on defense, when we talked about the Detroit Lions, we talked about their offense. We weren't talking about how they were, the 78 Steelers or whatever. We're talking about a team that was driven by their offense, and all they did was blitz. That's all I saw them do was blitz. I didn't see these great schemes or anything like that. And even before this game, when they played Washington, I think back on that game where we handicapped Monday Night Football. We took the Lions, and we had to sit up there, almost had a heart attack when they played the 49ers. We didn't know if they were going to cover on the 49ers. The 49ers, with all their offensive injuries, went up and down the field on the Lions. They just happened to turn it over a couple times. So I'm not sure if this is a great hire from a defensive standpoint. Yes, he is one of them. He did play for the Jets, but I don't know.
He was certainly good when they had to beat Minnesota on that Monday night game to win the division. He was good that night. So if you want to just take it away from him, other times, sometimes he was good. So, you ever thought that maybe he blitzed a whole lot because they had so many injuries? They just had to cover up for some holes. So, I don't really know.
I understand that, but when you go against Jaden Daniels and he's killing you on the blitz, can you at least try something else? That's all I'm asking. You don't have to just keep blitzing every single play. I'm just saying when you're a defensive coordinator, try something else. I personally wouldn't have hired him. I think he just should have gone in the offensive direction, got another offensive coach, and then I would sit down, like you said, with Aaron Rodgers. I'd have a conversation with him and let him know, hey, you're going to be our quarterback next year. We're going to spend a high draft pick on a quarterback. And if you want to act like Brett Favre and how he did you don't have to mentor him. But we are going to bring in an offensive or a quarterback to be in that room with you because you're not going to play another 10 years. We have to have somebody and secure our future. And so, just like you said, I would listen to him very carefully, look at his mannerisms, and if he seemed that he wasn't on board at all, I'd say, okay, you can go. And that would be that.
Well, I wouldn't. I would never tell Aaron Rodgers, you don't have to mentor him. Because this is a team. It's not all about you. So you tell Aaron Rodgers he don't have to mentor him and let him just, sit around like they say he did Loved in Green Bay. I don't know how true that is, but same thing. He's got to be more like how they said Kirk Cousins was with Penix in Atlanta or something like. You got to be a team player, So If he says, well, you know what, hey, you
Well,
coach it,
that's a trap.
then
That's a
then
trap.
you got to be gone. You got to
That's a
be
trap.
gone. Well,
That's a
how's it a
trap.
trap?
Because it's a conversation I'm having with him. I say, and you can do him like Brett, like you said, Brett Favre did you in Green Bay. I would say it, and like I said, I would pay attention to what he says with that. And if he's literally saying, "I'm not gonna do it," I get rid of him. I
Well,
get rid of him.
well, it depends on what the owner and from what I understand, the owner up there basically said that they should have benched Aaron Rodgers during the season. But if you've got the owner support, you know what? Now that I think about it, I might just say, you know what? It's been nice knowing you, Aaron. You got to go. You just got to go. And you know who you got? Tyrod Taylor and whomever. I think they got the quarterback Travis, who was with Florida State, who got hurt. Okay, so you know I would try to trade up and draft somebody. I really would. If I can't trade up, I would just continue to build around. Excuse me. I would continue to build around the offensive line and to kind of get them a better. And I would go after Sam Darnold. Go after Sam Darnold and then draft a young quarterback. Or let's just see if, you know, what Travis can become. If Travis can't become anything, then, you know, the next few years. But I would go after Sam Darnold.
Well,
He
we'll see.
he played there before, so maybe
No,
he'll
no.
be different.
You can't do that. Not in New York with that media and those
You
fans. You can't
can.
you
You
can't you
can.
can you cannot bring Sam Darnold back to the Jets.
Well,
I would argue that you can't even bring Sam Darnold to the Giants. You can't even do that. You cannot bring him back in that media in that market.
I
You
don't,
can't do
I
it.
don't, I don't. I think you can if you draft a quarterback. I think you can. If you draft a quarterback, draft one of these Ewers or somebody. If you can get them in the second round, that's what I would do. You know, they'd be better than what they had. You know, I don't know which would be the worst reaction: saying you're gonna bring Aaron Rodgers back, or bring Sam Darnold back, because you know the fans kind of booed Aaron Rodgers at the end too. You know, so I don't know which would be worse, and we can't worry about the fans.
Get a
You can
rookie.
worry,
Get a
you
rookie.
know, a
You don't have
rookie.
you don't have to bring Sam Darnold back. Nobody Sam like I said, Sam Darnold can't even go to the Giants. He needs to stay where he's at
Uh,
and get franchised, or he needs to go to another team. He doesn't need to play for either New York team.
you know, he's matured, so maybe he'll be better. Maybe he'll be better. He's matured, so we'll see.
Yep, we'll see. And so we'll just talk briefly on this last opening that has not been filled yet. That's the New Orleans Saints. And I think that was probably the worst job I mean, obviously there's only 32 head coaching jobs in the NFL, so somebody is going to take the job. But when you look at where they're at as far as the salary cap is concerned, what they have at quarterback, on defense, they're definitely going to be entering rebuilding mode. And probably the most idiotic part about this whole thing is they just redid Carr's contract last year. So you're going to be stuck with Carr for another year or two. Um, that's just not a good job, in my opinion. But who
Well, let
knows?
me just
Maybe
say
they'll
that.
get Joe Brady. He coached at LSU. Maybe they'll get him.
Well, maybe. I mean, but I think that should be. I think Mike McCarthy ought to go there. I think he should go there and and sign a long term deal, and with the understanding that we're gonna rebuild. That's the best candidate I think that's left out there. You know, Joe Brady. I don't know. I mean, he ain't Tom Brady. You know, and I just no, I don't know. I would get, if I were the Saints, that's who I would go after.
Yeah, if I was the Saints, I would go after Mike McCarthy too. He's a good coach. But if I was Mike McCarthy, I would just take a year off. Take a year off and see who gets fired this next year. I wouldn't want to go to the New Orleans Saints and take that job. If I was the Saints, I would try to go after a young head coach like a Joe Brady, Kellen Moore, somebody like that. Maybe Mike Kafka, the Giants offensive coordinator. You get somebody young and tell them, hey, we know that you're probably not going to win next year, but we want to see you progressing each year. And kind of do that's what the Lions did with Dan Campbell. The team was
Yeah.
improving each year. So find you somebody like that.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
All right. So that kind of moves things out of the NFL discussion. Let's talk a little bit quickly about a couple more topics. I want to get into college football and then we'll finish up with the NBA. So, talking about college football, did you have a chance to tune in a little bit to that national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame?
Yeah, I watched it a little bit, back and forth, but that wasn't one of my priorities. I put more priority on getting some rest, although I did see the game. And, I was kind of hoping that Notre Dame could win it because I don't like the way that Ohio State has kind of an advantage over teams. But Notre Dame has an advantage too that we need to talk about also. But it was an okay game. I thought Ohio State would blow them out, and then at the end, they started struggling like they were trying to lose the game. So they had to hold on for dear life to win that game. It was a so-so game. I thought that I really didn't think that those were the two best teams in the playoffs. They just happened to be the survivors.
Okay. Well, those two teams were left. Those were the two best teams in my opinion. But that's another discussion. For me, the first problem that I have with this game is why the heck are they playing this? And I told you a little bit about this in our text thread with the family. Why the heck are they playing this game on a Monday after the divisional round? Why would they do that? If I was running college football, let's say if they had a commissioner or I was on the playoff committee, I would not want this game played on a Monday. They should have played this game before the divisional matchup because we already know once that Monday comes after those games in the NFL, we're going to mostly primarily be talking about what happened in those playoff games. You don't want to compete with the NFL. What was wrong? I don't know why they needed all that time off after they finished those semifinal games. They should have played that game last week on a Thursday or a Friday where they were the standalone game. You don't have to compete with anything. And that could have probably drawn more interest. The other part that I don't like is how late this game is kicked off. You look, they started the playoffs. You can say that. They could even played it on Saturday. No, not even Saturday night because of the NFL. They started the playoffs on a Friday. So they could have done it. Indiana and Notre Dame played earlier this month on a Friday night. You could have done that. You could have done it on a Thursday because Texas and Ohio State had just played the last Thursday. They should have played this game on this past Thursday, not this Thursday night, but the Thursday night before, and you would have been a standalone game. Everybody's paying attention to it, but you're playing games late in January when this season probably should have been over at the end of at the beginning of January. But that's a whole nother point. Getting to the game, I watched some of it, but again, I prioritized my rest, just like you said. I went to sleep. And that's okay. No, Ohio State beat Notre Dame, and so it is what it is. I'm more of an NFL guy. Congratulations to the Buckeyes, and that kind of gets me to my next point. When we talk about NIL, this is 2 years in a row now. The SEC hadn't even been in the championship game. I think when I'm looking at the overall state of college football and where it was just 3, 4, 5 years ago, now that that NIL is legal. And we know what that is. It's not even name, image, and likeness at this point. It's pay for play. Okay? If we just want to be honest with this. I think that we're starting to see a trend where these SEC teams, yes, they're going to always be a contender and be involved. But I think now in the era that we're in with NIL, pay for play, that it has opened it up for the Big Ten, and not only the Big Ten, but some of these other big-time schools all over the country where they have a chance to win. And the reason why I say that is because if you traditionally look at it in Ohio State and a Michigan and Illinois, shoot, you can even say Northwestern, whoever you want in the Big Ten, maybe even a UCLA, somebody like that. If you look at those teams and you compare them to Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, yes, those states, those regions down there where those SEC teams are talent laden. You're going to always be able to find talent down there. But in the era that we're in now, if you look at, let's say, Ohio State, they have 100,000 students enrolled at that school. Big Ten schools are traditionally better academically than SEC schools. So you're going to have more high achieving students come out of those schools. That's just what it's been like historically. So when you're looking at doctors, lawyers, businessmen, businesswomen, whatever, Ohio State, that's got 100,000 students enrolled. Every year they're churning them out, they're graduating. You're going to have a bigger pool to draw from when it comes to going out and asking your fan base and alumni to donate to NIL. And that's exactly what happened this past year. They got the highest paid coaching staff. They went and took Chip Kelly from UCLA, who was their head coach, and paid him almost like a head coach to be their offensive coordinator. They went and took Quinshawn Judkins from Ole Miss. They just basically paid all these players, and they've got the best team that money can buy. And I think you're going to continue to see that trend. Before we had NIL, the SEC could, bring the kids in and say, look, we play in warm weather down here. We got a barbershop in our locker room. Look at our facilities. But now it doesn't even matter about that anymore. And that's part of why Nick Saban retired. He said, it's not about what you can do for them as a program. Now it's about how much you can pay them. And so now these kids don't care about where they're going. That's why we saw the top basketball recruit in the country. He's going to BYU. It is not because BYU is some powerhouse program. It's because they're paying them the most. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing. It's more of a level playing field. Well, it's not really level, but I feel like it's brought the SEC and those teams back to the pack because they can't compete with some of these other big time schools like Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame when it comes to donations. And that's exactly why I think his name is Greg Sankey, or maybe he's the commissioner of the SEC. The athletic director for Alabama 2 months ago was borderline begging his fan base, saying that these schools are coming to get our players. We're begging you guys to give us the money so we can keep our players in-house.
Well, I think that, first of all, Ohio State in the Big Ten is not going to win every national championship game. And even with the players that they had, and you can call me a homer or whatever you want to, even with the quarterback that Georgia had he not gotten hurt, they would have been the best team. Because they've got the best tradition and the best coaches. And overall, I think they had the best team. Now, as far as I want to talk about something a little bit different. They've got the NCAA has got to do something different about the seeding, and we'll talk about that probably more in depth on another show. They have to reseed these teams. Ohio State should not have been an 8th seed, first of all, in that situation. And also, something that a lot of people don't really realize.
Even as the 8th seed, they played the toughest schedule in the tournament and won.
Yeah. Okay, they did. But also, another advantage that Notre Dame had over people is this. They're not in a conference. So guess what? When they play in the they got a home game, so they got to get all that revenue. And then, of course, they had to split it a little bit with who they played. The team that they played at home that shouldn't have even been there. They had to split it with them. And then they go on and play the second game. And then they play the national championship. They get $20 million that they get to keep all by themselves. Whereas somebody like Ohio State, they've got to split some of it with the conference. So Notre Dame has the best financial advantage, and they can offer teams and players more money. But I just think that there were just a couple of injuries that kept, because it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Ohio State was going to win it all. It really wasn't.
Well, I'll say this. I was shocked that they lost any games this year. I could see them losing to Oregon. I mean, they lost at the last second. They should have beat Oregon at Oregon. When they lost that Michigan game, that was ridiculous. But it also woke them up. And Carson Beck, last time I checked, he wasn't hurt when they played Ole Miss. Ole Miss dominated Georgia in that game. So I don't think that was a foregone conclusion that they were necessarily the best team in the league. They barely beat Texas in the SEC championship game. So Notre Dame,
they beat Texas twice this year, and would have beat them a third time had they played them a third time.
Texas wasn't that good to me. I mean, they just weren't. Ohio State beat them in Texas by a couple touchdowns. And yes, the game was closer than it should have been, but we all knew that Ohio State was dominating that game. So Ohio State had the best team, in my opinion. And yes, Notre Dame is making that money, but they're also taking a risk with how they're doing it by being independent because they can never get a bye week. They can never. They're going to always have to play in that first round versus some of these other teams like Georgia, Ohio State, USC, whoever. they can get that bye week and rest up and then go to a neutral place and not have to be worried about any kind of weather because that second game is going to be indoors in a bowl setting. So
Well, as we saw this year, the bye week didn't hurt them. What hurt them was they just weren't good enough to beat Ohio State. Ohio State should have blown them out, I think, because I don't think Notre Dame shouldn't have, they really weren't that much better than Georgia.
they beat
Georgia
them though.
just
They
they
beat
did
them.
beat them. They
And
did beat them.
Carson Beck don't play defense either.
But
So
Carson Beck would have done something on offense, so the defense wouldn't matter as
I don't
much.
think Georgia had it this year. They have good players, but they didn't have it this year. They weren't the
They
team this year.
didn't. They didn't only because of I think Carson Beck, who got a tremendous deal to go to the University of Miami. He wasn't all that good. And Georgia, they cannot. I don't think that they're gonna be a contender if they have to use the quarterback that they use. They got to get somebody else in there to to be at the in the saddle for them to come back.
Yeah, so I think coming up this year, I think it's going to be Texas's conference to lose. In the SEC, I think Texas is the front runner. We'll see what happens once all of this pay for play and these transfers settle in at their schools. We'll see what happens, but um, putting a bow on the college football season. Now we look forward to the NFL draft and next year. So, in other sports topics, have you been paying attention to what's going on down there in South Florida with the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, and I think that somebody, not only the Miami Heat, the NBA they need to pay, doggone, they need to do something to Jimmy Butler. I'm talking, they need to make an example out of him. I hate to say it, but you can't let these players control the way that he is kind of trying to control the Heat. He did the same thing when he was up in Minnesota. I think the Bulls, he kind of did the same thing. He kind of wears his welcome out. Somebody need to teach him a lesson, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking earlier this season on the NBA ratings and how they're down. And something like this just makes it brings after we stop talking about that, it brings it back up and rears its ugly head. And it's because there is too much player empowerment. I'm all for getting your money and putting yourself in the best situation to succeed in life in general. But we talked about this earlier. I was raised, if you give your word, you sign a contract, you need to finish your contract. We're not talking about Jimmy Butler, who's on his last year with the Heat, and he's going to be a free agent this year coming up. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy that has the rest of this year, a year in which he made $50 million, dollars, and then he's got a whole nother year to go next year on his contract where he's going to make 52 and a half, $53 million. Dollars. So we're talking about a guy that has money and length left on his contract, and he's pouting, saying that he doesn't want to play for the Heat anymore just because they won't give him a 2-year, $120 million extension. And so if I'm looking at who's wrong in this situation, it's Jimmy Butler. I would call his bluff. If I was the Heat, I would just, as long as he's being insubordinate, showing up late for flights, not playing hard, I would let him keep doing that. And he's gonna fold before I'm gonna fold. We're the Miami Heat. We're gonna be here. We'll find a way to reload. I'll just let him keep getting suspended, and he won't make his money. So I completely disagree with how Jimmy Butler's handling things.
Yeah, I mean we're on the same page with that. He did get upset because he didn't get the supermax contract extension, but you can't do that for a player that's playing 50 to 55 games a year. You can't do it.
And he doesn't play in the
So
playoffs too.
that's
He
what I
has no
mean.
problem getting hurt or saying he's hurt and not playing
Right,
in the playoffs. It's
right.
unbelievable. Who would pay somebody that's not going to even play 50, 55 games? It's crazy.
And Joel Embiid is another one too. He on the same. He's not acting like Jimmy Butler, but come on, man, you got to do something about that situation.
That is the worst contract in the league, Joel Embiid. I think if they tried to trade him, I don't think anybody would take him at this point. I don't think they would because he's got another 4 or 5 years where he's making 60 million a year. Why would you take something like that when you can't even get the guy to play? He could play in
Somebody
it.
somebody taking.
I want to know who would do that deal.
Hey, somebody will take
He
Joel
doesn't
Embiid.
even play. He's not even playing. But
I
let me
know.
ask you this, because we've gone back and forth over this a little bit. You probably don't remember. Who's better, Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic?
Nikola Jokic.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure because I, especially these last couple years when they're going back and forth on who the MVP was, I heard a lot of conversation. Maybe it wasn't from you, maybe it's from other people that were saying Joel Embiid was better than Nikola Jokic. That's
Well,
ridiculous.
I think if Joel Embiid is healthy and he plays all the games, it's a much more close conversation as far as that's concerned because he does have some skills now. He can dominate. But he can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I would say you could have the conversation, but I think Jokic is already a top 10 player of all time. If you look at everything
Oh
that's
my
going on,
gosh! Oh my gosh! Now of all time, stop it! Stop it! Okay, he's not of all time. Okay, so don't do that. Don't go there. And I don't want to name all the players that I think is better than Nikola Jokic, but he is not a top 10 player of all time. Just
okay,
stop it.
I'm not going to even argue. We'll have that conversation another day, but I can easily look at numbers and what he's done so far as awards are concerned. He's definitely a top 10 player of all time, but we're not going to get into that discussion.
Okay, he's not. All right.
So you got anything else you want to talk about before we sign off? I know you
No,
mentioned.
we're good. I'm good on that. I think it was I enjoyed it today, and I look forward to next week.
Yeah, this conversation went a little bit long, but hey, when we get, in these discussions, sometimes it's hard to turn it off. So, um, we are going to keep bringing you daily, weekly, monthly sports topics amongst other, current events that are going on. And we appreciate you all signing in this today on channel 1349. And until next time, take care.